The next we have to discuss is question number 6. What are the cellular components of blood? Alright, so we have to tell about the cellular components of blood. First of all, blood is a connective tissue, right? Blood is a connective tissue, and if we talk about the major components or components of blood, then components of bloods are erythrocytes, that means RBC, red blood cells. Then we have leukocytes, that means WBC, white blood cells. Then we have thrombocytes, which means platelets, and also plasma is there. So all these four components such as erythrocytes, leukocytes, thrombocytes and plasma, these four components are actually responsible for the formation of blood, right? Now, these cells, erythrocytes, leukocytes, thrombocytes are actually the cellular components of blood. These are the cellular components of blood, and they are forming 45% of the blood. They contribute in the formation of 45% of the blood, and the remaining 55% of the blood is actually formed from the fluid portion, that is plasma, right? So first of all, what is the thing? That blood is actually a connective tissue. Now, if we talk about the components of blood, it is made up of erythrocytes, leukocytes, thrombocytes and plasma. Plasma contribute into the blood for about 55%, and the erythrocytes, leukocytes, thrombocytes, these all three types are the cellular components or are the different types of cells suspended in the fluid portion called as plasma in the blood, which contributes into the blood for around 45% of it, right? Now, this question is actually asking about only the cellular components of blood, such as erythrocytes, leukocytes and thrombocytes, because plasma is actually a fluid portion. Plasma is actually a fluid portion, so we are not going to talk about the plasma in this question. We have to tell the cellular components of blood in this question only. So, if we talk about the cellular components one by one, we have erythrocytes. First of all, erythrocytes are red blood cells, or we can call them as RBCs, right? So, if we talk about the mammalian erythrocytes, then they are anucleated, they are enucleated, right? This means they do not have a nucleus. There is no presence of nucleus in the RBCs of mammals. If we talk about the shape, then the shape of RBC is biconcave, right? If we talk about mammalian erythrocytes, that means red blood cells, they are biconcave in shape. They are enucleated cells. And if we talk about what is the main function of RBC or erythrocyte, they are actually, first of all, they are actually colored cells. RBCs or erythrocytes are colored cells due to the presence of hemoglobin pigment in them, right? Now, what is the function? What is the main function of RBCs or erythrocytes? They transport oxygen to the tissues. They transport oxygen or respiratory gases into the body, right? So this is the main function of erythrocyte or RBC. Then if we talk about the next cellular component of blood, that is we have leukocyte or WBC. WBC or leukocyte means white blood cells. First of all, they are nucleated cells, and there is no regular shape of them is fixed. There is no regular shape of leukocytes or WBC. They are irregular shaped, but they are nucleated. That means whenever we are talking about the mammalian erythrocytes or RBC, they are enucleated. They do not contain nucleus in them. Instead of them, they are having hemoglobin, which is a pigment, respiratory pigment, which helps in the transportation of respiratory gases such as oxygen into the body. But if we talk about the WBC cells, that is leukocytes, they are nucleated, right? They are irregular in shape. And if we talk about the function of them, that is the main function of leukocyte is they help into providing the immunity to you, and also we can call them as they are actually the main part of self-defense mechanism in our body, right? If we talk about leukocytes or WBC, they are divided into two groups, granulocytes and agranulocytes, right? Based on the presence of granules in them, them. So we have divided leukocytes or WBCs into two categories, granulocytes and agranulocytes. So in the granulocyte, three major types of cells are included, that is basophils, eosinophils and neutrophils. And in the category of agranulocytes, lymphocytes and monocytes are included. What is the function? They help in killing the microorganisms which are actually causative organisms for various kind of diseases into our body. They helps in killing them. They helps us fighting with them, right? So this is the main function of leukocytes or WBC. Moving on to the last cellular component of blood, that is thrombocyte, which we can call also by the name platelets, right? You must have heard about platelets. The main function, the very important function of thrombocytes or platelets is actually providing blood clotting, or they activate during the blood coagulation, right? So thrombocytes or platelets are actually functions as blood clotting factors or blood clotting cells, right? These are the cells or cell fragments which are made from the megakaryocytes of bone, and the main function of them, they help in the blood coagulation or blood clotting. So this is the cellular components of blood. So now let's write answer of this question, and we will writing like this. We will start like this, that components of blood are erythrocytes, leukocytes, thrombocytes and plasma. But plasma is the fluid portion of blood, whereas erythrocytes, leukocytes and thrombocytes are the cellular components, of blood, right? Among all these four, erythrocytes, leukocytes and thrombocytes and your plasma, erythrocytes, leukocytes, thrombocytes are the cellular components of blood, whereas plasma is actually fluid portion of blood, right? Now let's talk about the cellular components of blood. The first one we have is erythrocyte. If we talk about the first cellular component, that is erythrocyte, we can call it as red blood cell, or RBC, right? Now if we talk about what are these erythrocytes or what is the function of them, so first of all we'll write that erythrocytes are biconcave, enucleated, that means there is no nucleus present in them, and they are colored cells. They are biconcave, enucleated and colored cells. Why they are colored and due to which these are the colored? Because of the presence of hemoglobin pigment in them, they are colored cells, right? Mammalian erythrocytes are enucleated and there is the presence of hemoglobin pigment in them. These cells, erythrocyte cells, are red colored cells because of the presence of hemoglobin pigment in them. The shape of erythrocyte is biconcave, as we already have discussed. Then if we talk about the function of erythrocyte, so they help in the transportation of respiratory gases into body. Right, so this is about erythrocytes or RBC. Moving on to the next cellular component of blood, that is we have leukocyte, right? Let's write leukocyte and thrombocyte on the next slide. So I am writing about leukocyte, the next cellular component of blood over here, that is leukocyte, right? Now if we talk about this leukocyte, they are also called as white blood cells, or in abbreviated form we can write them as WBC, right? Now if we talk about leukocyte, they are also known as white blood cells or WBC. They are nucleated, that means nucleus is present in them. So we'll writing like this, these are nucleated irregular shaped cells, right? Leukocytes are irregular in shape, there is no fixed shape in them, and also they have nucleus in them, so they are nucleated cells. Now these WBCs are divided into two categories, that is granulocytes into which we count basophils, eosinophils and neutrophils, right? The next category we have is granulocyte, agranulocyte, right? And we count the agranulocytes as lymphocytes and monocytes. Alright, remember these all are the WBC cells: basophil cells, eosinophil cells, neutrophil cells, lymphocytes and monocytes. All these are the various kinds of WBCs or leukocytes only. They are just categorized into two different groups based upon the presence of granules in them, right? So all these basophils, eosinophils, neutrophils, lymphocytes, monocytes, all are the types of leukocytes or WBC cells. And the function of them is, if you talk about the function of leukocyte, then they help in fighting against the microorganisms, or I may write pathogens, right? Pathogens are the microorganism which causes diseases in us, right? Pathogens are actually the microorganisms which are responsible for causing diseases into the body. So WBC cells or leukocyte cells are actually helping in fighting against the pathogens. Hence They are the cells providing immunity and self-defense mechanism, right? So this is your second cellular component of blood, that is leukocyte or WBC. Moving on to the last cellular component of blood, that is thrombocytes, or we can call them as platelets, right? So the third or last cellular component of blood we have is thrombocyte, or we can call them as platelets. They are cell fragments. These are cell fragments. So thrombocytes or platelets are cell fragments formed from the megakaryocytes, formed from the megakaryocytes of bone. And if we talk about the function of thrombocytes and platelets, they are helping in the blood coagulation or clotting, right? So these thrombocytes helps during blood coagulation or clotting, right? So these are the cellular components of blood. Alright, so with this, all these three components, we have completed question number 6.